As always, this video is sponsored by nobody because I don't have a sponsor yet. All right, let's get into it. Hello there, my name is Jim, aka Dr. Cellini, the real Dr. Cellini, well, the first Dr. Cellini. On today's episode, we're going to be reacting to a video that I found quite heartwarming online. Heartwarming? On today's episode, we're going to be reacting to a video I found on YouTube from a very popular and one of my favorite YouTube accounts called The Dodo. This video is entitled The Dodo Foster Diaries. The dog who didn't have a chance surprises everyone. So let's take a look.
He's ready to get out of here.
His owner brought him into the shelter and said that he couldn't walk.
Okay, I'm 5 seconds into the video and this dog looks like he's paralyzed. So what I'm seeing is that the back legs he's dragging, he has what we call paraplegia. From what I can tell, I'm not examining the dog, but I don't see in these couple of seconds at least any voluntary movement to his pelvic limbs, whereas he's very easily able to prop himself up and stand up in his thoracic limbs. So I'm very suspicious that he suffered a spinal cord injury of some sort, and the paralysis is what led him to go to the shelter, and the shelter's thinking that they're going to euthanize him because his quality of life is poor because he's paralyzed. That's a lot of work to take care of a paralyzed pet of that size. It looks like a German Shepherd. So the owner did what they thought was best and brought him to a shelter. Unfortunately, shelters are overrun with sick and injured animals, and it looks like from what they're describing in the video that this dog was set to be euthanized because of his paralysis, essentially.
I had this insane emotional connection to this dog.
Oh, what a sweet boy. Oh, he's so sweet.
My goal was just to foster him until we could get him healthy. It was the most pitiful thing you've ever seen.
So it looks like this person is doing a really awesome thing, which is finding a paralyzed pet and saving him, essentially, and committing to taking care of him, which is really an honorable thing to do. So my hat goes off to her for sure.
It's just his whole spine is just protruding. He's so stressed.
Okay, so this is a common thing that I hear owners talk about, or they notice. She mentions in the video how his whole spine is protruding. So what is usually happening there is the bones that you're feeling, the ridge of his spine is actually his what we call spinous processes. So those are the little bones that stick up out of the vertebrae. If you're a person, they stick out. They're what we feel when we feel the kind of the middle of our back going down, those little ridges that stick out. So those are the bones like this in a person, but in a dog, they walk like this, so you feel the top of them. When the spinal cord is injured and a dog is just generally between that and just the immobility and them being immobile, the muscles around their back will start to atrophy, and the bones don't protrude necessarily, but they're more noticeable because there's no soft tissue covering them anymore. They're just kind of sitting there with nothing to really cover them, so you can feel them really easily, making it more noticeable.
Hi, baby. How's it doing?
My fiance put him immediately in the shower. I honestly don't know the last time he was bathed.
So this is super important. They're giving him a bath, and that's an extremely important thing that you want to do when you have a paralyzed or close to it pet or any sort of immobilized pet for any reason, simply because you want to keep them as clean and dry as possible. Any urine or fecal scald that gets on their skin and sits there, combined with their skin being just kind of pressed against the ground or sitting in one position for a long period of time, can lead to pressure sores and skin infections, and those things can be fatal. This is similar to when people are immobilized for any number of reasons. You have to be very diligent in taking care of them and keeping their skin healthy and keeping them from getting pressure sores or bed sores.
Usually that the next morning, I'm like an emotional
People seem to know
wreck.
what they're doing for sure.
He thinks that he has degenerative myelopathy. His number one suggestion is to humanely euthanize him just because of all that he's been through.
Okay, so let's talk about degenerative myelopathy for a little bit. That term is thrown around a lot, and in my opinion, it's one of the most misunderstood diagnoses in all of veterinary medicine. Degenerative myelopathy, or DM, I'll just call it DM from now on because it's a lot easier. DM basically refers to a degenerative condition of the spinal cord. It's just a descriptor term. It just means degenerative, and then myelopathy means a spinal cord disease. So degenerative spinal cord disease, that's all that term means. But basically, if you think of the spinal cord as like a fiber optic cable, the little wires that run in it start to degenerate microscopically, and this is due to a dog's genetics. A dog has to have a certain genotype. Usually, a dog has to have a certain genotype to produce this disease, and once it happens, it typically progresses. So what you see initially is the pelvic limbs will start to become weak and uncoordinated. Sometimes urinary or fecal incontinence can start with that, and over time, as it progresses, the pelvic limbs will start to become essentially paralyzed, not moving at all, and the degeneration will spread towards the brain, and now the front limbs will be affected. Now, most dogs are euthanized humanely before that degeneration progresses up the thoracic limbs, because if you leave it to its own devices, what will happen is the nerves in the cervical or the neck portion of the spinal cord will start to degenerate as well. And not only do you have a dog that can't stand up in all four legs, which is a much more poor quality of life, but the nerves that control their breathing, their respirations will start to degenerate, and they'll ultimately die of things like aspiration pneumonia or flat out respiratory failure because they can't move their diaphragm. So generally, when we diagnose degenerative myelopathy, once dogs reach a state where they're either paralyzed in their pelvic limbs or their owners think their quality of life is poor, and usually, I've never seen this happen as far as letting it progress to all the way up front like that, but usually we recommend euthanasia before the thoracic limbs or the front legs start to become affected. So degenerative myelopathy can only be diagnosed with a biopsy of the spinal cord, which you can't do in a live dog for obvious reasons. You can't just take a chunk of spinal cord tissue. It's too delicate. So it's only diagnosed for all practical sense post-mortem. So you have to look at their spinal cord under a microscope after a dog passes away. So trying to diagnose this condition when dogs are alive is really tricky. The way that we do it is through a number of conditions. One, you have to have a dog that has neurologic deficits affecting their pelvic limbs, like what this dog is having. Two, you have to have a normal MRI and a spinal tap. The reason being, you have to rule out other causes of paralysis. You have to rule out things like a disc herniation, a tumor, meningitis, a stroke, trauma, a malformation, things of that nature. You have to rule out all other things that could produce the exact same clinical signs as degenerative myelopathy. It can all look the same outwardly, but there's very different prognoses and treatment options for all these different things. So once you have a dog who has clear neurologic deficits, but his MRI and his spinal tap is all normal, then you say, well, something's got to be explaining these neurologic deficits that we're seeing. That's when you submit a genetic test to look and say, okay, does this dog have the genotype capable of making this disease, the phenotype? If a dog then has the genotype that's positive for it, that's when you say, okay, we've done as much as we can ante-mortem. We've now essentially reached a diagnosis of degenerative myelopathy. But unless you've done all of that testing, you really just don't know. You can't know what's the cause of this paralysis. You don't know if it's going to get better, if it's going to stay, if the dog is going to stay paralyzed, or if it's going to get worse, like degenerative myelopathy would. You don't know. So it's a little bit tricky to give owners a grave prognosis and give a dog a condition that's going to progress if you haven't met all those conditions. So that's why I'm very careful when I see a paralyzed pet. I don't right off the bat give a diagnosis because we just don't know. So you have to be very upfront with owners and say, we don't know what's going on.
I hate to think that his last day was spent sitting by himself in the exam room. I said, can I take him home and give him like a good last 24 hours? And he said, sure.
Are you so excited for all your good stuff you're gonna have for dinner tonight? Oh, I got you a bone and a new toy. Look, I got you another toy.
I remember thinking, so we took him out in the front and made him this like little picnic.
So this is something we very commonly see when owners are faced with euthanizing their pet and a planned humane euthanasia, is they'll spoil them. They'll give them really good treats, human food, I've had owners give cheeseburgers, all sorts of different stuff, just to spoil them so that their last, days or hours remaining with the owners and kind of their last bit of experience as a pet, just to be a very positive one, so they kind of go out very happy. So this is something we very commonly do and recommend to owners, and owners take it on themselves to do it, which I think is great.
I said, let's just see if we can get him up and walk. Let him at least remember what it feels like to do that.
Oh, good boy. Oh, good boy. Oh my God, look at him. He's so proud.
It was like his back legs are doing kind of small
so
little
now
movements.
Our little buddy is starting to move his back legs a little bit more. So once you've demonstrated improvement in any way, shape, or form, you've basically ruled out DM, because that condition should just slowly worsen with time. It's really not possible for it to get better. So if a dog is getting better but we don't know what caused the paralysis, the improvement is what rules out degenerative myelopathy.
Trying to use them to walk.
Good boy.
So this is great to see. Anytime you see a dog go from paralyzed to starting to improve and move their back legs and bear some weight and start walking again, there's nothing better than that. Especially as a neurologist, that is the absolute best thing you want to see.
And function. And that was like the catalyst. That was the moment everything
So that's
started
awesome.
to
So he's basically running through the park right now. The owners have a sling on him. He's playing ball. He's got his blue ball that the owners help.
Consciously put this dog
But the
down.
owners
And
playing,
he said,
that's awesome.
me neither, good. Called and I said, hey, I'm so sorry, but I'm gonna have to cancel. From that point on.
Okay, so that's really cool. So this dog has two pieces of equipment on him that I really liked for paralyzed or close to it pets. One is he's got booties on his feet. These are basically like little shoe coverings for dogs. They serve two purposes. One, they provide a really good grip to when they walk. So it allows them to grip any surface a lot better. So if you've got like a hardwood floor at home and they're having trouble with that because they can't grab and create friction against the floor, booties are a really good way to provide that friction, to give them that traction and that support. The other thing this dog has is a Help 'em Up harness on. That's my favorite harness by far. I'm not sponsored by Help 'em Up, but I wish I was, and I will be happy to be sponsored by them one day. Regardless, it's the best harness that I found on the market. It has handles on top, and there's two parts. One goes around the chest and one around the pelvis. It's really great when dogs are immobilized to help owners get them around and kind of help guide them along, or even just flat out carry them. It's really easy to do that.
He decided he just didn't want to leave us. He wanted to live.
So it looks like this little guy has found himself a family, which is amazing. That's awesome. To go from paralyzed and abandoned, about to be euthanized, to finding a family that loves you this much and just wants to take care of you, man, that is the absolute jackpot. So it's so nice of them to want to do that and to commit to taking care of him. That's awesome.
It's like fate that he was brought into our lives. He's just like part of our family. He's staying here forever. There's no way we can let him leave.
All right, thank you so much for watching my video. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. If you like what you see here, please feel free to hit the like and the subscribe button. See what I did there? Thank you so much for watching my video. Feel free to leave a comment below. Let me know if you have any experience with a paralyzed pet or know someone who has. I love hearing stories about that, especially the success stories of dogs who regained function and started walking again, or who just had a good quality of life and lived the rest of their life as a paralyzed pet, but were happy otherwise. So thank you so much again, and we'll see you next time.